Now, I've spoke a few times about the PlayStation 5 life cycle being extended, and that continues here today. We now have this report from Sandstone Insights in Japan, which is an independent equity research service focused on providing in-depth analysis of Japanese tech companies for investors. So this does hold some weight, and I've used AI to translate this from Japanese into English so we can understand what they're saying. And this is from David Gibson. It was posted on the 16th of January. And there's two things which jump out to me as a PlayStation gamer. First thing, they have mentioned here that the gaming division continues to perform well in Q3. Sony's third quarter results are expected to beat market expectations, driven by sales of both in-house and third-party games. Then the next bit, which I think some people will be happy about and some of you will not, it is the PlayStation lifecycle extended. Sony expects the PlayStation 5 lifecycle to be extended, and the PlayStation 6's release is likely to be delayed longer than many expected. So this gets interesting now if it's delayed longer than many expected for some reasons which you might not be thinking about. So let's dive into that right now. The PlayStation 6, I think a lot of people thought that might be arriving round about holiday season 2027. So just under maybe 2 years from now. If it gets pushed out further and it is extended a lot more than people are expecting, I'm starting to think that's round about the 2030 mark. So we're back to like a 10-year life cycle for the PlayStation 5. If that happens, that has me wondering about the hardware again, because PlayStation, if it was coming out in 2027, they would be working on it right now. They would, they would know what the hardware that's going into this thing is. If it's going to be 3 years later, that hardware might be a little bit, out of date. So would it be a new hardware stack? Which makes me think, if this is the case, are Sony potentially scrapping what they have designed right now? Or maybe not scrapping it, but updating and upgrading it? Because think about by 2030, AMD, it'll be a new version of their Zen hardware, which will be out. It would make sense to move to that. Probably a lot more bang for your buck. Potentially, fingers crossed here, people, it would even be cheaper as well. More, enhancements in terms of AI upscaling and frame generation, which current hardware is leaning into, a lot, because it's not just about raw power now for, raw rasterization for graphics. They're really relying a lot more on frame generation. You see AMD doing it with their Fidelity Super Resolution, and then you see NVIDIA doing it with NVIDIA DLSS. So I think this could impact what hardware we're going to see in the PS6. We park that and just think about getting your hands on one of these devices. Does a delay of that, a couple of years, does that bother a lot of people? I love getting new hardware. I love getting new gadgets. So I'd be excited to see this arrive whenever it, decides to break cover and Sony shows it. However, it does kind of feel like the PlayStation 5 generation, and in particular because the PS5 Pro is out, has a lot more to give. And with things going crazy with, AI just now, hoovering up all the hardware that you would possibly want for any of these consumer devices, pushing prices up higher and higher, I kind of don't want to spend like, £1,000 or $1,000 or whatever it is, wherever you are in the world, for a PlayStation 6. I would rather just stick with the PS5 Pro. Devs will just get more and more out of it as they optimize more for hardware. You always see it, or used to see it in previous generations. Think about, comparing games at the start of the PS3 generation to the end. It's like night and day how much better they can look. They did that same with the PS4. Now we've got the PS5. I see no reason why that trend can't continue. This really doesn't bother me too much. I would love to hear your opinion on this, though, because I think a lot of people will be a little bit triggered by this, and a lot of you will be like, no, the PlayStation 5 generation just feels like it's getting warmed up, just starting. And it kind of does even more so than normal because it had a bit of a bumpy start when this generation was launched. So 2020, PS5 launched. Then the world basically shut down. We had, the pandemic. That caused a lot of shortages of the hardware, people trying to get hold of them. You were lucky enough to get one pre-ordered. I was lucky enough to get one pre-ordered and got one right away, which was great. However, shortly after that, I think due to the pandemic again, there was the chip shortage. So a lot of devices which use microchips were struggling to be produced in the volumes that were required. So there was another shortage because of for PlayStation 5s then. And then there was, the third element, the trifecta. There was scalpers which were just hoovering up PlayStation 5s to sell them for double and treble the price on eBay. So that caused a lot of people, not to be able to buy the hardware they wanted because you had scalpers with bots just buying them as soon as they went for sale online. So it did take a lot of people a little while to get their hands on the device, and a lot of people were just, taking their time. The PS4, still plays a lot of games amazingly, and it did, especially at the start of the PS5 generation. You had a lot of big games where cross-generation, like when you had the New Horizon game, it was playable on PS4 and PS5, so a lot of people were thinking, I don't really need to upgrade, and that's totally fair and valid. Now we're getting to that point where, the games are starting to come along. GTA 6 should be here this year, which will be huge. I think that will be a big reason for people to upgrade to the new hardware. Extending a couple of years, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I'm not too bothered. I think this might be quite good for the gaming world because there isn't such a huge jump now between generations. If you look at even the PS5 versus the PS4 Pro, it's basically like much faster load times. That is the biggest difference you notice. I know you can, count pixels and if you're into all that stuff and look at it under a microscope, but just for the general casual gamer sitting there playing the game, there's not a massive, massive difference. So I think this could be good because then when the PS6 arrives, if it's even more enhanced and powerful and capable hardware, maybe that jump and difference between games will be, more noticeable. And maybe they'll do something cool with the hardware as well. Another big upgrade which was cool on the PlayStation 5 was the DualSense controller. That definitely was a nice enhancement and a new experience over the DualShock which we had for the PS4. Well, yeah, let me know what you think about this. Are you cool with the delay, given the state of the world right now? There's just ridiculously stupid tariffs being thrown about the world all over the place just now. There's like AI hoovering up everything. Who knows what's going to happen with that? Is it a big bubble that's going to pop soon? I don't know. But right now, I think delaying the PS6 might be a smart move.